Principal of Norwood School, and I've been asked by Dr. Freed and the rest of the committee to make a presentation today about the rank start for the superintendency. So the format that I'm going to use is really pretty simple. All I'm doing today, all I'm going to do is that I'm basically having like a brain dump. Like I'm going to talk about my first year as superintendent, where I came from, and what's going on. I originally was supposed to have like this really nice like laptop with like a clicker here, like Penny had, and I got here this morning and the laptop doesn't work with a printer and all that, so I have to kind of go back and forth. I do have a handout that everything you see up here will be given in much more explanation, so you can totally completely take notes if that's the way you operate, but you don't have to write a thing down today if you don't want. I also had a newer version of my PowerPoint, which is on my laptop, but we had to go off a flash drive. So there's a slide or two that, from an explanation that I had here that I just want to spend some time talking a bit about. So who I am, and I'll explain to people who have never met before. I'm the superintendent principal of Norwood Public School. What we are is that we are a 566 student, kindergarten through 8th grade, single building district in the Northern Valley. We're part of a consortium of 8 different districts. 7 towns, Harrington Park, Northvale, Closter, Horworth, Old Tappan, Northvale, Norwood, and Demorest. And what we do is that we are 7 separate districts that send to 2 high schools, Northern Valley, Old Tappan, Northern Valley, Demorest, and we share a common curriculum center. It's one thing that we share. We have other shared service agreements that we have going on there. But the reason I begin by mentioning the kind of school I work in is that try to identify today and not compare. Like, being the superintendent principal of a small K-8 566 student building is different from like Jeff Zoller, who's in how many schools in Westwood? 6 schools in Westwood, which is a K-12 district. How many students?
Just under 3,000.
Just under 3,000 students. So in reality, you're just under 3,000. I'm just under 600. So if I do the math correctly, you are 6 times the size of my district. But the purpose of today was to merely share with you what I did during my first year, and I really focused on actions and events that were applicable, that kind of could go across district boundaries. And that's what I really want to do today. I know that, like Ricky, for example, how big is Hillsdale?
It was about 1,400 students.
1,400 students, and you're a K-8, right? So you have 3 schools or 4 schools?
3 schools.
3 schools. Okay. Mike is a K-8 person. He's same structure in Northvale. You guys are in Closter. The principal's in Closter, aspiring to be superintendents, I'm sure. And Closter is 2 schools. And how many students in Closter? Ballpark, what would you guess total?
I think about 1,200.
About 1,200 in 2 schools, and you guys are from?
Assistant Superintendent Bergenfield.
Bergenfield? And you're both from Bergenfield. Okay, so you work for Mike Kuchar.
Correct.
Right, exactly. So my goal today was I wanted folks to identify and not compare, because there are things that I didn't want to lose anybody in the conversation by saying, well, you know, for example, we're not a K-8, so we can't do this, we can't do that. We have this view here. I'm on a 45-minute self-imposed deadline. If I go along, I'll be amazed. And focus on leaving here with 3 takeaways. Focus on leaving here with 3 things that you could possibly use as you move forward. Now, as I was planning this presentation, and this is the only slide near the end that is kind of like this. I don't like it when I go to presentations and people read the slides to me. So this is the only one I have, except for the very end, that has everything on here. And this actually came out of a friend of mine is the CEO of West Bergen Mental Health. His name is Michael Tizzoli. And we emailed back and forth a lot. And he sent this to me, this came across last week, and it talked a lot about the change process. And I think that when you're a new superintendent, I think that the change process is a foregone conclusion. The district might be well-structured, very stable, very successful district, but by your presence alone, there's going to be change that comes in there. And so what this really talked about here was, and I'm not going to read it to you, but it really focuses on new leaders when they're in, and use companies, and I added everything in parentheses I added. And they talk about culture and strategies. And I'm very verb-oriented. They talked about choosing your battles carefully, observing the behaviors that are going on, comparing how people should act as opposed to how they do act, prioritizing the important behaviors, recognizing those that are very important, very visible, and then emphasizing those that you want. And I wasn't planning on including this, but I came across it, and as I read through it, it really made a lot of sense to me. in terms of preparing this presentation. So I just wanted to give that to you. You have this, it's on the cover page of your takeaway packet. It's on the cover page, you don't need to worry about copying that down. Now, what I have now is I have a series like of 16 slides that are really basically 2 or 3 words. And I just want to talk a bit about what that means in relation to what I did in Norwood and what that kind of worked with. Now, for access resources for me, that was all about reaching out to fellow superintendents. That was all about going out to other people who I work with, people who are like-minded and like-attitudinal, people who shared the same beliefs as me, not just the same title as me, and working out and working with those people inside that first year. Now, I joined the Seton Hall Study Council. Ray Albano, who is now in Glen Rock, he ran it out of, he was the interim in Hillsdale. It was myself, and I think there were 7 or 8, might be like 7 other people in that presentation, right, Mike? And when we were with Ray Albano.
Yeah.
And we met on a monthly basis. And so you look out for like-minded people, access those resources, because being a new superintendent is somewhat scary, but here are people who have done the job before and who you could work with. Also, one thing I did in terms of a resource that my mentor, who I met through the Seton Hall New Superintendent Program, was Dan Fishbein out of Ridgewood. Dan had a transition plan. He actually had a plan. It was about 14 or 15 pages long. And his plan basically broke down for me all of the different things that you should do going in. I took his plan, I modified it, and what I did too is I shared it with the Board of Education. And because you want to, when you're new in superintendency, there's a lot of eyes on you, as there should be. And one of the groups that you need to show that you're working effectively is the Board of Education. I shared their plan with me. Also, in terms of resources, things inside the district, I sat down in Norwood and I read through all of the meeting minutes for the last 18 months. So I went to the board office, I sat down and I read through all of the minutes of all of the Board of Education meetings for the previous year and a half. I did that for 2 reasons. One, I wanted to know the information that went on in the district, and number 2 was, I've learned that school districts have like seasonal calendars. Like every October you approve this, every November you approve that, every December you approve that. And I wanted to learn the different calendars and the flow of what was going on there. And then I made a tickler file. As I read through those resources, those minutes, I then kept a sheet on the side and I wrote down all of those different things that I'd have to go there. And then I worked with the grade admin, and she then took those forms and she put them in separate files, and we knew what we had to do each month. That was really important. Big part for me in the beginning for the superintendency was making connections. I reached out to the people, the key players in the district themselves. Examples would be the parent-teacher organization, the union association, that leadership, the office staff, buildings and grounds. Remember, secretaries and custodians, they run schools, they run school districts. You know, I made it a point, I sat down with all of our secretarial staff, all of our administrative assistants, and I met with them. I met with my head of buildings and grounds, I got his feedback. And I reached out to them. I think one of the best things I did in the very beginning of my tenure in Norwood, even before I arrived there, I invited the association president out for lunch. I called him up cold, I said, let's get together, let's go out and have lunch, and let's just have a conversation. Wasn't very formal, wasn't very sit down, no agenda. I wanted to meet this person and have a conversation and begin to build that relationship with him right away. And one thing I did which was really important, and this isn't on the sheet because like I said, these copies were made before I changed it, a lot of informal pop-ins are nice. Stopping and saying hello to people. You know, going into an office and introducing yourself and how are you, what can I do for you. Stepping away really from that pomp and that